The massive Zorthian fleet loomed over Earth like a dark storm on the horizon. Their warships, sleek and terrifying, filled the sky, casting ominous shadows over the planet below. It was a sight that no human had ever seen before, an overwhelming force, poised to crush the last hope of humanity. The Titan, Earth's one hope for survival, sat silently in the shadow of the fleet, a lone figure standing against an army far more powerful. Inside the bridge of the Titan, Captain Ethan Blake gripped the helm, his eyes locked onto the view screen. His hands trembled, but his mind was focused. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. They had been preparing for this moment for years, but the time to fight had finally come. The Zorthians were not just invaders. They were a tidal wave, and Earth's resistance was but a single drop in the ocean. Yet it was that single drop that would have to push back the tide. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Sarah Tannen, the ship's weapons officer, her voice sharp with urgency. "We're getting an incoming transmission from the Zorthian flagship." Ethan didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on the dark expanse of space. The Zorthian ships were massive, nearly dwarfing the Titan in size. The flagship, in particular, stood as a symbol of their overwhelming power, its glowing engines and sharp edges glinting ominously in the distant light of the sun. A crackling sound filled the air as the Zorthian transmission came through. Commander Shkar, the leader of the Zorthian fleet, appeared on the screen, his alien face cold and unfeeling. "This is Commander Shkar of the Zorthian Empire," his voice echoed across the bridge. "Surrender now, human. Your defenses are useless. The Zorthian fleet will annihilate you." There was a pause, the tension thick in the air. Ethan's gaze never wavered. He knew the stakes. He knew the Titan was humanity's last chance, but the words of an alien commander meant little to him. This was not a battle of words. It was a battle for survival. "Shkar," Ethan's voice cut through the silence, "you'll soon find out that humanity doesn't surrender easily. We don't kneel, we fight." He slammed his fist onto the armrest of his chair, signaling to the crew, "All systems to full power. We're engaging." The bridge crew sprang into action, their movements precise and rehearsed. Sarah activated the Titan's advanced weapon systems, while Lieutenant Jackson Ward, the ship's pilot, brought the engines to full thrust. The Titan's shields flickered to life, a shimmering blue barrier enveloping the ship, ready to face the oncoming assault. The Zorthian fleet advanced, their ships firing on all cylinders. A barrage of energy blasts shot toward the Titan, but Ethan was ready. With a steady hand, he steered the Titan into a sharp turn, dodging the incoming fire. The ship shook with the force of near misses, but its agile maneuvers kept it one step ahead of the enemy. It was fast, much faster than the Zorthians had anticipated. "Target their flanks," Ethan commanded, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around him. "Focus fire on their smaller cruisers. They'll be the easiest to disable." Sarah wasted no time, locking onto the nearest enemy ship. With a click, the Titan's energy cannons erupted in a burst of blinding light. The first shot struck a Zorthian cruiser, disintegrating its shields in an instant. The alien ship exploded in a fiery ball, debris scattering in all directions. The Titan's cannons fired again, hitting another cruiser and sending it spiraling into space, disabled and broken. The Zorthian fleet was now in disarray, their smaller ships falling one by one under the relentless assault of the Titan. The Zorthian flagship, seeing the sudden shift in momentum, opened fire with its powerful main cannon, a massive beam of energy that tore through space like a blade. The shot missed the Titan by inches, grazing its shields and causing a violent shake throughout the ship. "We can't keep this up forever," Sarah warned. "Their flagship is too powerful. We need to find a way to disable it." Ethan's mind raced. He knew that the Zorthian flagship was the key. If they could take it down, the rest of the fleet would crumble. But it wasn't going to be easy. The flagship's shields were nearly impenetrable, and its weaponry was devastating. They needed a way to get close, to strike at its core before the Zorthian commanders realized what was happening. "Jackson," Ethan called out to the ship's pilot, "take us in closer. I'll give them a taste of what we're capable of." Without hesitation, Jackson punched the throttle, and the Titan surged forward, cutting through the space around it with unmatched speed. The ship's engines roared as it darted between enemy ships, narrowly avoiding their incoming fire. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as they drew closer to the Zorthian flagship, but he kept his focus sharp. This was the moment. "Now, fire everything we've got," he ordered. Sarah's fingers flew across the console, unleashing everything the Titan had. The ship's advanced weapon systems fired in rapid succession, each shot hitting the Zorthian flagship with pinpoint accuracy. The flagship's shields flickered, then cracked, and with a final burst of energy, the Titan hit its core, a devastating shot that sent shockwaves through space. For a moment, everything went quiet. The Zorthian flagship was still intact, but it was heavily damaged, its engines sputtering, its weapons offline. The Titan had made a mark, but it wasn't enough to finish the battle. The Zorthian fleet was regrouping, but the Titan had done the impossible. It had caused damage where no one believed damage was possible. The Zorthian had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they would learn the truth. The Titan was just one ship, but it was a symbol of something far greater: humanity's unwillingness to back down. Ethan looked out at the view screen, his face hardening with determination. They had made a dent, but the real battle was only just beginning. The fight for Earth had only begun, and the Titan would be at the heart of it. "Prepare for the next wave," Ethan ordered. "This isn't over yet." The Titan surged forward, its sleek hull cutting through the black void of space like a razor through silk. On the bridge, Captain Ethan Blake could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. The Zorthian fleet loomed ahead, massive, powerful, and ready to crush humanity beneath their heel. They were unprepared for what they would face next. The Zorthian flagship, Karath, gleamed ominously at the center of the enemy formation, surrounded by smaller battleships and assault cruisers. Each of these ships was a masterpiece of alien engineering, far more advanced than anything Earth had ever built. Ethan knew that the Titan was outclassed in terms of raw power, but humanity's one advantage was its unpredictability. He would use that to his advantage. "Prepare all systems, weapons and shields on full standby," Ethan commanded, his voice calm but tinged with the pressure of the moment. "Lieutenant Tannen, charge up the hyper-ion cannons." "Aye, Captain," came the reply from Sarah Tannen, the weapons officer, as her fingers danced across the console. The powerful weapons of the Titan hummed to life, the deep blue energy crackling with raw intensity. Ethan's eyes were locked on the view screen, watching the Zorthian ships advance, their weapons already charging. The enemy was confident, too confident. They thought they were invincible, that nothing could stand against their might. But they didn't understand the human spirit. "On my mark," Ethan said. "We hit them hard, hit them fast." Suddenly, the first wave of Zorthian assault ships opened fire, their energy blasts streaking toward the Titan. The ship shuddered as the first hit struck its shields, sending sparks across the bridge. The Titan's energy barriers held strong, but the strain was visible. They weren't going to be able to take many more hits like that. "Shields holding at 75%, Sarah reported. "But we can't take another direct hit." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to Lieutenant Jackson Ward, the ship's pilot. "Take us in close, Jackson. I want to be right in their faces when we hit them." Jackson, his hand steady at the controls, nodded. "Understood, Captain. Hold on tight." The Titan rocketed forward, ducking and weaving through the barrage of enemy fire. Ethan's heart raced as the ship sliced through the Zorthian formation, narrowly avoiding several blasts that would have torn any lesser ship apart. They were outnumbered, yes, but the Titan was agile, faster than the Zorthian ships anticipated. It darted like a predator among much larger prey, dodging fire and returning with deadly precision. "Target their rear shields," Ethan ordered. "Let's see how they react." The Titan's weapons fired in rapid succession, energy blasts ripping through the air. One of the smaller Zorthian ships exploded in a flash of light as the Titan's advanced weaponry found its mark. The blast sent shockwaves through the space around them, creating a ripple effect that temporarily disrupted the enemy fleet's formation. "Nice shot, Captain," Jackson called out as the ship sped past, evading the counterattacks from the Zorthian fleet. The crew of the Titan was working seamlessly together, adrenaline coursing through their veins. But despite their success, Ethan knew this was just the beginning. The Zorthians weren't going to let a single ship ruin their invasion. Their retaliation would be swift and unforgiving. "We've drawn their attention, Captain," Sarah warned. "Their flagship is targeting us." Ethan's gaze hardened. If they couldn't disable the flagship, the Titan was as good as dead. It was the heart of the Zorthian fleet. Destroying it was their only hope of turning the tide of the war. "Jackson, full speed ahead, straight at their flagship," Ethan commanded, his voice sharp with purpose. "We need to get close enough to land a critical blow." Without hesitation, Jackson pushed the engines to maximum, the Titan surging forward like a bullet toward the Zorthian flagship. The Zorthians fired at them with everything they had, their energy beams lighting up the void in deadly arcs. Each shot that hit the Titan's shields sent the ship shuddering, but they held firm. "Shields at 40%, Sarah called out, her voice tight with urgency. "We're not going to survive another barrage like that." Ethan's heart raced as the Titan drew closer to the enemy flagship. The massive ship loomed larger, its imposing silhouette dominating the screen. He could almost feel the heat of the Zorthians' weapons charging up, ready to strike. The Titan's weapons were now fully charged. Ethan had only one shot at this, one chance to do something that would send a message to the Zorthians. "Fire everything we've got," he ordered, his voice a steely command. The Titan's energy cannons unleashed a massive barrage of devastating fire, the beams of energy cutting through space like thunder. The first few blasts hit the Zorthian flagship's shields, but they held strong. Then the next round of fire found a gap in the shields, striking the flagship's hull directly. The Zorthian flagship rocked violently as the Titan's weaponry pounded its outer layers. Sparks flew from the flagship's outer plating, and a series of smaller explosions erupted along its length. The Zorthian ships around them hesitated, clearly thrown off by the unexpected resistance. The Titan had not only survived this far, it had managed to hurt them. But Ethan knew that this wasn't enough. The flagship was still operational, and the Zorthians were regrouping for another strike. They needed more time, but time was a luxury they didn't have. "Jackson, take us in closer," Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve. "We need to hit their core. We can't leave anything to chance." As the Titan continued to close in on the Zorthian flagship, Ethan's mind raced. The odds were still against them, but they had proven one undeniable truth. Humanity was not just going to roll over and die. The Titan had shown that, no matter the enemy, no matter the odds, they would fight back. As the Titan closed in on the flagship, the final moment of truth approached. Would they strike the killing blow, or would the Zorthians unleash their full power and crush them all? The Titan was now within striking distance of the Zorthian flagship. The vast warship loomed ahead, its shields flickering as the Titan continued its relentless assault. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the weight of what was at stake. One misstep, one wrong move, and it could all be over. "Captain, we've taken another hit." Sarah Tannen's voice crackled over the intercom, urgency ringing in her tone. "Shields are down to 20%. If we take another blast like that, we won't survive." Ethan's eyes didn't leave the view screen. The Zorthian flagship was massive, its surface glistening with alien technology. Every energy pulse that struck the Titan made it shudder, but they had come too far to turn back now. Their only chance was to finish what they had started. "Jackson, take us closer. "We can't rely on the long-range weapons anymore," Ethan said, his voice calm but resolute. "We need to board the flagship." Jackson Ward, the ship's pilot, nodded, his hands steady as he manipulated the controls. The Titan lurched forward, its engines roaring as it closed in on the Zorthian flagship. The smaller ships in the enemy fleet fired relentlessly, but the Titan was moving too quickly, too unpredictably. Their fire was hitting nothing but empty space. Ethan's mind raced. The Titan wasn't built for close-quarters combat. It was a warship designed for ranged attacks, capable of crippling entire fleets with its advanced weapons. But the Zorthians had never expected a human ship to get this close. They had always thought their sheer numbers and overwhelming firepower would be enough to crush Earth's defenses. But the Titan had proven otherwise. "Sarah, charge up the pulse disruptors," Ethan ordered, knowing their best chance now was to disable the Zorthian flagship's internal systems. If they could cripple the ship's energy core, the whole fleet would fall apart. "Aim for the reactor core. We only get one shot." Sarah's hands flew over the console, adjusting the targeting system. The pulse disruptors were designed to send a focused electromagnetic pulse directly into a ship's core systems, shutting down shields and engines in a single strike. It was their last-ditch weapon, and they were running out of time. The Titan barreled toward the flagship, dodging a fresh barrage of incoming fire. The heat of the moment seemed to slow everything down, the hum of the ship's engines growing louder in Ethan's ears. He could feel the pressure mounting. This was it. There was no turning back now. "Now, Sarah," Ethan barked. With a precise motion, Sarah fired the pulse disruptors. The weapon's hum turned into a high-pitched scream as the pulse shot forward, cutting through space with the intensity of a storm. For a split second, everything was still, until the pulse hit the Zorthian flagship's core. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the enemy vessel, followed by a violent tremor that shook the Titan to its very core. The flagship's shields flickered out of existence, and for the first time, the Zorthian fleet had lost its invulnerability. "Direct hit," Sarah shouted. "The flagship's shields are down. Their core systems are unstable." Ethan's eyes widened. This was the break they had been waiting for. The Zorthians were no longer invincible. Their pride, their arrogance had been shattered by a single ship. The Titan had done the impossible. But now, they had to finish it. "Jackson, full power to the engines. We're going in." Ethan's voice was firm, his gaze unwavering. He had never been more sure of anything in his life. The Titan would be the spark that ignited the rebellion. They would either break the Zorthian fleet or they would fall here alone. The Titan shot forward with a new ferocity, engines glowing as the warship tore through the space between it and the crippled flagship. They were heading straight for the heart of the Zorthian Empire's power, the flagship's bridge. If they could board it, they could cut the head off the snake. But the Zorthians weren't finished. A flurry of attack ships shot out from the flagship, their weapons blazing. They were desperate now, trying to slow the Titan's advance, but their shots were wild, panicked. The Titan weaved in and out, evading the blasts, but there were too many ships, too much firepower. "We can't keep dodging forever, Captain," Jackson called out. "If we don't do something soon, they'll overwhelm us." Ethan's mind raced. They needed to get to the flagship, now. He turned to Sarah. "Prepare the boarding pods," he said, his voice hard with resolve. "We're going in." The Titan didn't have much in the way of close-range weaponry, but it did have one advantage: the boarding pods. Small, agile, and heavily armed, they were designed for this exact situation. Taking the fight directly to the enemy's doorstep, the Titan could send them straight into the flagship, where the enemy's numbers wouldn't matter. Within moments, the Titan's boarding pods were deployed, cutting through the void like missiles fired from a cannon. Each pod carried a small team of soldiers, specialized infantry ready to breach the Zorthian ship and disable its core systems. The countdown was ticking, and Ethan knew that once the pods were deployed, there would be no turning back. "Pods away," Sarah reported. They're on their way. Ethan watched as the pods streaked toward the Zorthian flagship, their targets locked. But as they neared their destination, a sudden explosion erupted from the flagship's outer hull, shaking the Titan once more. It was a final desperate attempt by the Zorthians to push them back. But it was too late. The pods had already hit their marks. The Titan's crew held their breath as the battle for the flagship began. The soldiers inside the pods were already breaching the outer hull of the Zorthian flagship, fighting their way through corridors filled with alien soldiers. Their mission was clear: shut down the flagship's reactor, disable the enemy's command center, and send a message to the Zorthian Empire that humanity was not to be underestimated. As Ethan stared out into the blackness of space, he knew the next few minutes would determine everything. The fight was far from over. But humanity had already proven one thing: the Zorthians had underestimated them. And now, they would see just how wrong they were. The Titan's breach teams were already on the move. As the boarding pods deployed, the Titan's crew could only watch as their soldiers made their way into the Zorthian flagship, the heart of the enemy fleet. The mission was clear: disable the flagship's reactor core, disrupt their command center, and send a shockwave through the Zorthian military. But in space, even the best-laid plans could go wrong. "Captain, we've got enemy forces swarming around the pods." Sarah Tannen's voice rang through the intercom, panic underlying her usually calm tone. "We've lost contact with several of the squads." Ethan's face hardened, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. This wasn't supposed to happen. The soldiers had the element of surprise, but the Zorthians were ruthless. And now, it seemed, they were fighting back with everything they had. "Jackson, can we hold off those enemy ships?" Ethan asked, his eyes locked onto the view screen where the battle between the Titan and the Zorthian forces unfolded. "We're outnumbered, Captain," Jackson said, his voice strained as he expertly maneuvered the ship through the chaos. "But we'll do what we can. Just get those soldiers through." Ethan gave a sharp nod. The Titan had already proven its strength in battle, but now it was time to rely on their ground forces. The soldiers inside the boarding pods were humanity's best. They weren't just going to let a few Zorthian forces stop them. They would fight for their lives and for the future of humanity. On the flagship, inside the dark, cold corridors of the Zorthian warship, humanity's finest were up against a ruthless enemy. Captain Ethan Blake's mind was with them as the battle raged on. Every moment felt like an eternity. Lieutenant Alina Roses, leader of the Titan's breach team, was the first to make it past the outer hull and into the Zorthian flagship. Her squad of elite soldiers followed close behind, weapons at the ready. The air inside the flagship smelled sterile, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. It was like walking into the lion's den. "Watch your six," Alina said softly, signaling her team to move quickly. The tight corridors of the Zorthian warship made it difficult to move quickly, but they had no choice. The reactor core was deep within the ship, and they had no time to waste. Suddenly, the quiet of the hallway was shattered by the sound of alien footsteps. Heavy, armored boots echoing off the walls. The Zorthian soldiers were closing in. "Here they come," said Private John Carter, raising his rifle. "Take them down fast." The first wave of Zorthian soldiers rounded the corner. Their sleek armor was unlike anything human technology could replicate, designed for both offense and defense. It made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. But the soldiers of Earth had something the Zorthians didn't: heart and determination. Alina's team opened fire, the energy blasts illuminating the corridor. The Zorthian soldiers retaliated, their alien weapons firing in rapid bursts. But the humans were faster, more agile, and better coordinated. They fought with the ferocity of those who had everything to lose. The first few Zorthian soldiers fell, their armor sparking and crackling as they hit the floor. But more kept coming, and the humans were beginning to feel the weight of the battle. "Alina," shouted Sergeant Mike Roberts, who was watching their rear. "We've got more coming in from the side." Alina didn't hesitate. Push forward. We've got to get to the reactor before they lock it down. With a battle cry, Alina and her team surged forward, cutting through the Zorthian defenses. They were making progress, but time was running out. The flagship was still operational, and each second they spent fighting took them farther from their goal. Meanwhile, back on the Titan, Ethan was growing increasingly anxious. The ship was taking heavy damage from the Zorthian forces, and the Zorthians were retaliating with everything they had. But still, the Titan held strong. They had already defied the odds once. They couldn't afford to stop now. "Captain, the Zorthians are beginning to regroup," Sarah warned. "Their forces are pushing us back. We can't keep this up much longer." Ethan's mind was racing. He needed a solution, something that could tip the balance in their favor. And then it hit him. "Sarah, fire the proton torpedoes at the flagship's engines," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to disable their movement. It's now or never." Sarah didn't need to ask twice. "Aye, Captain." The Titan shifted in space, its weapons locking onto the Zorthian flagship. The proton torpedoes were humanity's last trump card. Capable of disabling the engines of even the most heavily armored ships, they were the ultimate counter to the Zorthian advantage in numbers. With a deafening blast, the torpedoes launched from the Titan, streaking through space toward the Zorthian flagship. The Zorthian fleet fired back, but the Titan was moving too fast. The proton torpedoes hit their mark. An explosion rocked the Zorthian flagship, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The Titan had struck a critical blow, disabling the flagship's engines and throwing the entire fleet into disarray. "Captain, it worked," Sarah shouted, her voice filled with triumph. "We've disabled their engines. The flagship is immobile." Alina's team, now nearing the reactor core, heard the explosion through the walls of the flagship. It was the break they needed. "Let's go," Alina shouted. "We got one chance to finish this." The breach team moved with lethal precision, reaching the reactor core at last. The massive glowing heart of the Zorthian warship pulsed ominously. They had to plant the explosives and get out. Fast. As Alina placed the final charge on the reactor's control panel, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The mission was almost complete. But just as she turned to lead her team back, an explosion rang out from behind her. "Move, now," she shouted. The corridor erupted into chaos as the Zorthian forces launched a final counterattack, desperate to stop them from completing their mission. But Alina and her team were too close to fail now. They sprinted for the escape pods, weapons blazing, as the reactor core began to overload. Back on the Titan, Ethan watched as the breach team raced toward safety. The Zorthian flagship was about to collapse in on itself, and they needed to leave before the whole ship went up in flames. The seconds ticked by, each one dragging with the weight of humanity's future hanging in the balance. "Get us out of here, Jackson," Ethan barked. Now. With the last of the boarding pods aboard, the Titan broke away, engines roaring as it shot into space. The Zorthian flagship was moments away from imploding, and the Titan was escaping just in time. The explosion was massive. A shockwave rippled through space as the Zorthian flagship disintegrated, taking most of the Zorthian fleet with it. The few remaining Zorthian ships scattered, retreating in disarray. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated the Zorthians. They had stood their ground, fought back, and emerged victorious. But Ethan knew this was just the beginning. The Zorthians would not forgive such a loss, and they would come again. But for now, humanity had proven its worth. The Titan had sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated.